Hello and welcome to the Seahawkers podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Schultz, and on a big news day on Friday, I am joined by my good buddy, Adam Emmert. Adam, our Seahawks are moving on from Geno Smith, traded to the Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, for a third-round pick. And here we are thinking that maybe we'd be reacting to a DK Metcalf trade, especially after we just recorded a show tomorrow. Here we are. Now it's Friday, and I feel like a DK Metcalf trade is almost certainly going to be on the heels if they're already moving on from Geno Smith.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I'll say this. The month of March is a month that I genuinely can't stand, and I'm generally in a bad mood for the majority of the month. And I've been kind of in a funk the last 2 weeks, and this genuinely hurts my feelings, man. Like, this is, if you're worried at all about this year's gonna suck. Like, there's no viable option out there that's worth paying. And there's no quarterbacks in this draft that I'm like, yeah, you could try him out there week one and feel pretty good about it.
When you say there's no quarterback worth paying, the only way that I could see this going potentially to where it wouldn't be a rebuild is if they decide that Geno's number was getting to be too high, and maybe Sam Darnold's number makes a little bit more sense long term.
No, there's no planet that Sam Darnold makes sense. And I'll tell you why. It's a lot like the Zach Bond situation that we were talking about. You're buying at a peak of a guy's unprecedented season, like one wild card season where he looked good. And we all waited for Sam Darnold to turn into a pumpkin last year. And when the real bullets started flying, I mean, he turned into a tiny pumpkin. Like, he was awful. When I think about this, you're going to pay Sam Darnold around $40 million a year. And the report is that Geno was asking around 45. The Seahawks were saying like 35. Well, I don't know. To me, like, haven't done a lot of NFL contracts, but it sounds like you settle around 40. It's probably what Darnold's going to want. He's not going to sign for a 1-year deal either, because he's going to have multi-year offers out there.
Yeah, there's going to be competition for him.
Yeah, this is a guy that has been terrible for his entire career, except for a stretch of about 15 games this year. And you're going to go pay that guy $40 million a year while you watch the guy who's performed relatively well behind a sieve of an offensive line for the last 3 years. You'll let him walk out the door, or you'll jettison him to the Raiders. It makes zero sense to me for a now move.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, if they trot Sam Howell out there week one, it's unbelievable, man. It's just, of all the years to get rid of a quality starting quarterback, this isn't the one. The only thing that makes sense to me at all is if they're tanking for quarterbacks next year. That's the only thing that makes sense.
We've got Ryan911, our live executive producer, coming in with a $9.99 super chat. Says, cheer up, Adam. Hate to see Geno leave, but it's good for the content. So yeah, if you're here for the content, here we go, because Adam being furious at all potential quarterbacks that, I don't know, don't involve the Seahawks trading a pick to the Jets, that's probably not going to make Adam very happy. So, yeah.
Well, is there one of the free agent
Travis?
Is there one of the free agent guys or one of the draft guys that you could bring in this offseason that would make you happy, that you'd feel good about? Like, is there one? Do you feel differently about Darnold than I do? Like, I don't know.
I'm not a huge Darnold fan. We talked about it on the free agent show. Like, I'm a little bit curious about what they could do with Justin Fields. And not that I think that he's going to be better than Geno. It's more of the idea, and Zach Wilson maybe in that conversation too. I don't think that he's capable of starting necessarily, but it might be that kind of competition. And then while you're maybe not tanking, it's at least like we talked about weeks ago when we were saying, is it time to tear it down or is it time to double down? And you test out a few guys, maybe a couple guys, if it's Justin Fields versus Howell, or maybe you get rid of Howell, you bring in another guy to compete with, and you kind of have a year where it's not real great, but you're putting yourself then in position for a draft where quarterbacks might be a little bit more plentiful.
Yeah. I mean, you're punting on this season, and yes, definitely trade DK at this point. Trade everybody. Don't re-sign Ernest. Really, just it's time to have a fire sale. And actually, if you're going to do it, if you're gonna jettison Geno, jettison DK, then freaking do it. Like, actually tear it down.
Yeah, I would agree with you that Ernest doesn't make a ton of sense. Paying a linebacker that type of money, starting caliber money when you're kind of in that more rebuilding phase. Then you want to go out and get young at linebacker. And those, I actually, after we got done yesterday, I sat down and recorded with EJ Snyder of Bootleg Football, and we talked a little bit of draft. And there may be a linebacker who, in the first round, would make sense for the Seahawks to fill that spot. Outside of that, it gets pretty tough to be able to fill behind Ernest Jones. But yeah,
But who cares?
Right.
You're exploding one side of the football. Like, so who cares who plays linebacker? Hey, no, literally at this point, then you're just rooting for losses so that you can go, which I think is honestly a fairly dumb way to go about building teams. Like the tank. Hold on.
Root for losses.
You're gonna have to if you want the team to go somewhere that is productive in the future. At this point, go ahead and tank, root for the losses, and then you're doing this type of team building that I actually don't think is a good way to do it. And I've watched a lot of teams do it. I'm watching the Carolina Panthers do it right now. You tank, you get the draft picks, you draft a quarterback high with a crap team around him, you ruin the quarterback, you fire the coach, and then you rinse and repeat. Like, that is a stupid way to build a football team. And the fallacy too of, well, you got to have a quarterback on a rookie deal to win a Super Bowl. There's been like 2 since the rookie wage scale has been introduced. Every other Super Bowl has been won by a guy on a huge contract. So that's not the way that you go out and do it. That's not the tried and true method at all.
Paying Geno Smith upwards of $40 million is the way to win a Super Bowl either.
Oh, look, if you don't want to be competitive this year, then yes, you don't pay Geno Smith.
It's not about being a competitive. It's a competitive team. It's about being a Super Bowl contender. And I think that's been part of the argument of people on the move on from Geno Smith side is that, hey, Geno Smith is going to get us 9, 10, 11 wins every year, but is he going to be that quarterback that puts you over the top and that you can ultimately win with? And I think that that's John Schneider's answer too, is that based on that amount of money, that he can't be you can't build the things like within the offensive line. You can't build the offensive line. You can't, it takes away.
I disagree completely, by the way. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he hasn't been able to build an offensive line anyway. So, I mean, I told you my faith in that happening this year is not real high either. Blocktimus Prime saying, if
That's
Vegas
funny.
gets no E or DK, does this become the C Raiders podcast? Oh, man.
That's pretty funny. Well, the way I kind of look at it as well is, so the cap went up almost 30 million this year.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll do the same next year as it always does. So you pay Geno 40 million a year. Just the raise in the cap pretty much knocks out his cap hit when it gets expensive. In fact, it more than covers the cap hit for the first 2 years. So you still have then the ability to go back and spend on the offensive line, provided you draft correctly and you're not having to fill in all your holes in free agency.
Yeah.
So basically, so we should discuss what are the options going forward. So one is to get a stopgap free agent, or I guess the first is to pay Sam Darnold a buttload of money based off of a good 15 games and 95% of his career being shit. Like that's option one.
A buttload of money, no. I think that there has to be a number that makes sense for Sam Darnold. Just like the same answer with Geno. There's a number that makes sense and there's a number that doesn't. And I tend to think that going younger at the quarterback spot. The guys, that 2021 class with the guys like Fields, Mac Jones, like it's not. None of the options are great. This is the same argument that we got into after we moved on from Russell Wilson. There's no great, perfect option. Otherwise, then we would go, oh, well, that's what we should do. So we're kind of going with the best of the bad options. One option that's never bad is reading super chats from Scott Campbell Photography with the
Hey, what up, Scott? It's been a minute. Yeah.
Says, man, what are we doing? Are we drafting a quarterback? Trading for someone else? Geno wasn't that bad. Was this a John Schneider decision or Mike McDonald or both? So many questions. Definitely a John Schneider decision. Whether I would expect Mike McDonald involved in that decision, because those guys they involve. It seems like a close relationship between those two on exactly what they're going to do, and it's we'll see.
Look,
fallout is.
Yeah, you talk about Schneider and Mike, and they're often talking about the idea of alignment, and so it'd be difficult for me to think that this was all Mike or all John. I would think that they were both really down with this decision. And God, I can't, if Darnold name keeps popping up in the chat, I can't put into words how unexcited I would be for the Ginger. Like, just really no. So I guess the second option is that John Schneider has fallen in love with one of the quarterbacks from this draft, which is terrifying considering the bit of work that I've done on these quarterbacks. There's not one at all. There's not even a first-round quarterback in this draft. I know Shador's probably going to go in the first. I know Cam Ward's going to probably go in the first. People are talking about Jackson Dart going in the freaking first. Like, none of these guys are first-round quarterbacks. So,
are any of them better than Sam Howell?
Yes.
Okay.
Pretty much everyone. No, I'm kidding. But there's a handful that are that I look at and I go, yeah, those are guys that I'd be interested in to see if they could, move the offense and be an effective quarterback. But with that said, I want a effective veteran there to show him the ropes. Like, none of these guys are day one starter worthy.
And I'm also of the opinion that you want to fix the interior of the line before you end up drafting a quarterback. And so that's why
I would hope.
That's why the following year for the draft for quarterback makes a lot more sense. If you want to get one of the guys who are out there in free agency to try and get through this year, yes, this year's going to stink, but you at least have something on the horizon that you're looking forward to. Gambling Goat with the $4.99 super chat. I feel for Kubiak and the news staff. This did free up $31 million in cap for us, though, and that was one of the things with, as Geno hit that escalator within his contract, that now the Seahawks, they will not be paying that because it was a roster bonus. That's how that was going to be paid out, was in the form of a roster bonus if he was on the team come mid-March. So they won't have to pay that. They don't have to pay the current contract amount. It does free up a lot of cap space. So those fans of having a lot of cap space, here you go. Gambling Goat saying, Drew Lock. Adam, what about a return of Drew Lock to Seattle?
Sounds like a great way to tank. You wouldn't tank quite as hard as you would with, say, Ritter. Like, when he came out in the draft, I think my exact words were never Desmond Ritter. Never, ever, ever, ever. And I think that's kind of played out. I mean, shoot, at this point, bring in Minshew for a year. At least have some fun.
Minshew would be fun. That would be the most fun option if you're going to tank, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty clear that's the only viable option going forward. And Daniel Jones, Nate, you're running out the hits.
You know exactly. He's pushing my buttons right now.
Yeah, he's doing it. Yeah, I get it. No, that's good. Shoot, it's gonna be. I don't think it's gonna be Darnold. I would be more inclined, or it just makes more sense to me that they would bring in just some scab for a veteran for a year. Shoot, maybe they do just roll out Sam Howell because they obviously thought that he had something.
AZ Hawker asking, is Justin Fields a fit for the Kubiak offense?
No, he's not a fit for any NFL offense. Not one. He is freaking terrible. He's like the poorest man's version of Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, that would be. It's like if Jalen Hurts was worse at throwing the football, but he has the upside of running. So I think you have a little bit better than Sam Howell as a running quarterback, and maybe just as accurate. So I feel like he would be an upgrade over Howell. I mean, come on now.
He's probably just as accurate. Oh my God. Well, this is what we're talking about right now. Sam Howell, or just like going into this offseason, I was looking at some of the teams that were really in desperate need for quarterback and just thinking to myself, man, I actually feel bad for all of those teams because this is just a dismal year to be out, shopping for a quarterback or looking for a quarterback. And then they go and do this. And now we're one of those laughing stock franchises without a QB when there's none out there to be had.
I understand it from the perspective of I don't want to be a team that goes out and tanks. But I also, this is the fight that has been going on of whether or not that do you want to be a mediocre team or do you want to be a bad team for a little bit with that excitement of having that potential of being a good team. If they're in the, I keep going back to Darnold. I just don't think I could be super excited about it. What?
Why sign Leonard Williams? Why?
Well, when they signed Leonard Williams a year ago, I don't think that it was necessarily the plan. I think John Schneider wanted to move ahead with Geno. It's just that Geno wanted more money than it made sense for the Seahawks. He didn't have
$40 million makes sense for the Seahawks.
Geno Smith had his worst year as a member of the Seahawks. Would it have gotten better under Kubiak? I mean, you hope so.
No, it's not. Look, it's not about Clint Kubiak. I do know that they were going to do something about the offensive line. They've talked about it. We talked to those scouts. I told them what to do. They were going to do what I said, obviously. But look, you just get something in front of Geno. He was a man under freaking siege last year and played almost as well as Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold saw a little pressure towards the end of the year and was seeing ghosts all over the place again. I do not need who was the kid in the movie with Bruce Willis where they were seeing ghosts?
That's a reference that's probably over 30 years old.
I don't care. I don't need Haley Joel Osment or whatever the hell his name was at quarterback. I don't need a dude who's seeing ghosts. I mean, I would, I've seen Russ's name pop up in the chat a couple times here. I'd be more inclined to just bring in Russ for a farewell tour and call it good. Yeah.
I would be in for more than that. I would be in for Wilson over Scott Campbell's suggestion of Rodgers for a year. Build O-line, draft a quarterback in 26. Okay, the build the O-line, draft a quarterback in 26. Rodgers for a year. If the fan base wasn't supportive of Geno Smith, I don't think the fan base is going to be behind Aaron Rodgers.
Oh God, I saw Kyle Trask's name pop up in the comments here. Like, he is literal trash. He was bad at Florida, and he was never good at the Bucs. Like, okay. I guess if you're tanking, So yeah, I mean, the options are, who knows? Maybe they bring in famous Jameis for a year. We just have a YOLO chuck it all over the yard, 25 TDs, 25 picks, and Mike McDonald ages 7 years on the sidelines.
I think that this is it's throwing in the towel for this year, but
yeah, for sure.
I think you're looking at a deeper time horizon. So we've got Adam Schefter's tweet here. It says, backstory: Seahawks were working to extend Geno Smith's contract over the past week. When progress was not being made, the Raiders stepped in and showed interest in acquiring Smith. With Seattle struggling to get a new deal done with Smith, they opted for the 3rd round pick. So,
then just make Geno play out the year.
That's a big number too, and that's
it's
not double down if you're just making Geno play out the year.
That's true.
We set this up as 2 different options.
Yeah, you're true.
You have to go for it, don't take the middle road. Geno playing on a 1-year deal would have been the middle road.
Yeah, I think there was a real path to doubling down that made a lot of sense to be a very viable contender in the NFC. And this is the opposite of that. It's got to be a tank. At this point, we started it off at the beginning of the podcast saying, somebody saying, well, cheer up, it's good for content. Well, I mean, for today, but for the remainder of the season, it's going to be pretty miserable.
Yeah, I think that there's still a lot of things that you can evaluate during the season with a new offensive coordinator, with Coach Mike, as you work through the season. And like the defense is still going, depending on what they do with Ernest Jones, but say they draft heavily on the defense and they go real hard on the defense. Watching a defensive football team and a quarterback who's probably going to be sticking more toward running the football, we're going to be evaluating an offensive line that's getting better. Like they can still be relatively competitive and just not have a quarterback that's getting it done in those late moments where it really matters. And you start building that team to where you start feeling like you're a quarterback away. This isn't all that different than if you go back to when Pete Carroll and Tavares Jackson was the quarterback.
This is wholly different than that.
Well, we'll see what they end up with a quarterback, but
Tavares Jackson was a much lesser quarterback in comparison to Geno Smith.
He was a lesser quarterback than Geno.
Yes.
Yeah.
By a wide delta.
Okay. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So you have a quarterback that's less, but you're watching the defense grow. You're watching that offensive line build up. You're finding a running back, whether maybe they're moving on from K9, and you find a running back that can be the focal point of the offense then, and then to where the quarterback, like Russ early on, you're starting off young, and then the focus is more on the run game, focus more on the defense, and then the quarterback can grow into that position.
Sure. So, tell me right now, you plug in Sam Howell with this roster as it's constructed now. Obviously, there's going to be some more moves. How many wins? What's your over-under?
Oh, I'm not going to guess an over-under on wins until we actually know.
No, you're talking about building the defense and watching it grow and then build up the offensive line. So you're just a quarterback away.
I don't care.
How many wins?
I don't care what the win total is.
How many wins?
That's
I think you ought to if you're trying to build up the team to then go get the quarterback.
I ideally that you don't win a lot of games because then you have a good draft pick next season.
Right. So why invest in somebody like Ernest Jones and Leo Williams and try to build up the defense right at this moment this year?
Yeah. Well,
I would jettison all those dudes, get as many picks as you can, build the offensive line, and start from scratch.
Yeah. Scott H said 6 wins. Lisa saying 5 wins top.
And you don't want to be more than 3 or 4.
It's not super fun. We've done the not fun years, but we had some pretty good seasons after that. So we've also been through a lot of mediocre years, and we've seen that a lot of mediocre years also not fun. Like the most fun is when you're going and making deep runs into the playoffs. Geno Smith had 3 years to do that. They didn't get it done. Now they're moving on and hopefully putting themselves in that position then to where they can get those deep runs in the playoffs.
When?
I mean, ideally,
because
you
could have put some investment in the offensive line right now.
You can still do that.
Why? You don't have a fucking quarterback now. Why on God's great earth would you actually try to make it good now? Why can't we have both? Why can't we have a good quarterback and a good offensive line and then make a deep fucking run into the playoffs? Because that's what was on the goddamn table. And yes, Noof guy, I am not fucking upset because there was a clear fucking path to making this a very competitive team in this conference and being able to at least be in a championship game. Like we weren't that far away. We missed the playoffs by a fucking half game because they had a bunch of scrubs up front. One of the more easily obtainable positions in the entire fucking NFL in comparison to, say, some of the premium ones, and especially in a goddamn draft that's loaded with interior guys. They had an absolute path to do this while paying Geno $40 million a year for a couple years. Then you blow it all up, tank, and start from scratch.
So you are convinced that with Geno Smith and with the options that are out there and available for the offensive line, that the Seahawks were going to be a Super Bowl team next year?
I think they had a much better path to contention odds-wise by doing that than by doing this. This is what pushes you out 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You can even you were throwing this in my face in the last show about, well, you're so confident John can just fix the offensive line. Well, I'm going to say the same thing back to you. Well, you're just so confident that John could just go out and get another great quarterback in a year or two, and then we'll just be there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a potential for finding a quarterback that's better
so
than
much
Geno
harder.
Smith. It's tougher, but I don't think that Geno would get you there to a Super Bowl. And that's
I
kinda where
wholeheartedly
settled.
disagree with that.
And that's why when we got to that discussion of whether or not we tear it down or double down, I was more on the tear it down side. And so, yeah, just like you still, you're throwing it back at me about the offensive line. You don't want to protect whoever is behind the offensive line. Like, that's what you do. You can
Not this year.
You can have more success than you wouldn't if you can put guys in front of any quarterback and give them a little bit of time.
Not this year. You don't want to do that. Not now.
Maybe not now. But you still want to build your offensive line. I mean,
People talk about being stuck in mediocrity. We're real stuck in no man's land now.
this doesn't sound too much different from when we moved on from when we moved on from Russell Wilson. We thought we were going to be real bad without Russell Wilson.
True.
And they went out and they got Geno. They got Drew Lock. They made him compete. Geno won out. And we've been in the situation of kind of being mediocre the last couple years. So will they do that? Will they go out and find a guy who can kind of be mediocre? Or will they go out and get to that point to where maybe they put us in position to where we can draft a quarterback high? I want to be in the position to where you're a dynasty, not in the position of, well, we'll get by with whoever and kind of be good.
Cool. Look, if you're the type of fan, or anybody else that's out there that's the type of fan that doesn't mind sucking for 4, 5, 6 years to maybe potentially someday be a dynasty, for which happens to like one franchise once a generation. Okay. I hate that shit. I hate sucking balls year after year after year and then never getting anywhere.
When did we go through the time in the John Schneider era where we sucked balls year after year after year? That hasn't happened. He hasn't done that.
Could very well. If you look at the history of the league, you're more likely to go to the sucks for a good long time than to, oh, we found Pat Mahomes and we now have a dynasty.
That's more likely true because the dynasty quarterbacks come around once every 10 years.
What's my sucking?
I don't know. I just clicked the button. Yeah. I don't know what that means.
Okay.
I
don't give a shit what they do a quarterback this year now. Like, it's hard for me to even care about this season.
You're going to end up caring about the season. You're in your feelings now. We were in our feelings when they moved on from Russ. Like,
Are feelings always wrong?
No, it's fine to be.
Okay. No, I'm saying like factually incorrect.
Well, I'd say we were probably both incorrect about when they moved on from Russ, because I thought it was going to be the time for sucking after they got rid of Russ. And we were both wrong about that, because I think we both felt that way.
That's true. You don't have to pull those rabbits out of your hat. Yeah. I'm out of
Brian
cookies.
saying, don't quit the show, Adam.
Oh, I wouldn't do that. And Geno is the opposite of dog shit to Matt in the comments.
Yeah, I wasn't even going to put that up on the screen. Geno is not bad. That's
no, Vice.
These are the type of arguments.
Vice is missing the entire fucking point. Is that Geno Smith was not the problem. Repeat after me. Geno Smith was not the problem. He had the most fourth quarter comebacks of all the quarterbacks in the last couple years. How is Geno Smith the problem? Like, you're not stuck at 9 games because of Geno Smith. You are stuck at 9 games because John Schneider has sucked balls of picking offensive linemen up for the past 7 years. That's why. That's why. And in a free agent class that has some viable options, in a draft that is loaded with those guys, now's the time you punt on that dude. Now.
Because the number he was getting to was just going to be too much. I asked you weeks ago.
You got to pay it, dude.
At what number? Okay. Once
I said around $40 million.
Okay. So if it comes out that the Raiders actually pay Geno Smith an average of $45 million a year, would that put you in the mindset of, oh, okay, well, John Schneider was right to move on then, because $45 million.
No. What, because the Raiders are dumb enough to do a deal that the Seahawks said that they weren't going to do? Geno, look, you tell Geno in that negotiation, 45 or 35.
What number that comes out for Geno Smith do you go, well, John Schneider made the right call?
It doesn't matter. Like, the number, if you're John Schneider and you're negotiating with Geno Smith as a Seahawk, was going to be somewhere between 45 and 35. It's reported that he was asking for 45. And then it was reported that the Seahawks were at 35. I mean, I'm not a genius at making deals like our genius president, but like 40 is right in the middle there, right? And that's where it would have ended up. That's where it would have ended up, because you could have just told Geno Smith, well, you either take the 40 million or you play out the deal. He's not sitting out. Like, use your leverage.
45 million next year for Geno Smith.
What?
One-year
Who's
deal.
saying 45?
That's what his number was.
I'm saying 4. You don't pay him his number. Like, I don't. Why that's hard to understand.
If Geno says I don't want to negotiate, then that's
you
the
play
number.
out. Then you play out your deal this year.
That's what I mean. That would have been the number.
Oh,
because he hit the escalators.
But he wasn't going to do that. He was never going to just do that. He wanted the long-term security. He would have caved.
I mean, if you're Geno Smith's agent and you know that, then that's great. But if Geno has better options, and
he didn't have any options, that's the point. You gave him the option by trading him.
Yeah. So there's no number that could come out if Geno Smith gets a 3-year contract, average of $50 million, that you're going to go, John Schneider made the right deal.
No, because if the Raiders are fucking dumb enough to sign him to that kind of money, which they are, then more power to them, I guess. But that doesn't mean that you had to sign him for that number.
No, but so if Geno knows that there's other options out there, and he knows that,
but there wasn't. He was under contract, so there weren't other options
really
out there.
High. A really stupid number that I don't think that the Seahawks make the Super Bowl next year if he plays under that number.
Well, we're definitely not making the Super Bowl now.
That's why a lot of this hinged on DK. A lot of it hinged. I was ready that as soon as DK requested a trade, that, okay, if DK's gone, then I'm in this rebuild type mode and move on from Geno. Now it's Geno Smith's the first domino to fall, and now we're waiting on DK. So
they'll probably keep freaking DK now and do some half-ass in between shit again.
Well, we'll see. That would be annoying.
We could have easily afforded to pay him 40. That
we could have.
If you're willing to pay 35, 40 so much more. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. I don't think it's the answer for a Super Bowl.
I'm not yelling at you. I'm just mad.
I know you're mad. That's fine.
Yeah.
We can hug it out afterward.
Okay.
Crackabilly saying, have fun with Gardner Minshew.
It'll be fun. Yeah, I'll buy some jorts, grow out a mustache.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did we not get, um, at least I don't know, with the trade, with the Raiders, how did we not get Michael Mayer as part of this deal, Adam?
That's a great question. It should have been. And Nate, I am absolutely not afraid of change. What I'm afraid of is yeah, I'm afraid of change for change's sake and just doing it poorly. Like that's not being afraid of change. Just now wasn't the time with all the moves they had made up to this point, especially when there was a clear window.
Got Vieth in the chat asking, are we sure DK liked Geno? He said many times after Russ got traded that Drew was the guy and was going to play really well. Just asking. I don't know about their personal relationship. I don't know if it necessarily matters a whole lot.
I mean, he defended him at the podium a few times. DK did. So I don't know. None of us know behind closed doors on that one. No. Maybe that is
there were moments where it seemed like DK liked Geno.
For sure.
Yeah.
But that's public.
Whether or not
stuff.
They're best friends, I don't think DK and Russ were best friends necessarily. So
yeah. This just feels so random and scattershot to the snails comment here.
Yeah. Well, it's not scattershot if they move on from Geno, if they move on from DK, if they don't sign Ernest Jones. Like if the path is then acquiring draft picks and then building through the draft, not just through this year. Like I'm confident we have the coach of the future. The offensive coordinator of the future, that still remains to be seen. But if Kubiak's a guy that Mike likes and they think that they can build that way, then I would at least like to have that coaching group settled. And then they start building and finding guys that fit within the defensive system and within the offensive system, and that they can grow that way.
This gives Mike McDonald a lot less job security. Because look, I mean, I guess if ownership expects you to be bad, then maybe you get a reprieve for one more year.
Well,
but
you can't beat.
But you can't be a new coach and suck for miss the playoffs your first year by half game, and then be a 4-win team and then a 6-win team the next 2 years. He'll be out on his ass. So coach of the future. Boy, I sure hope so. I like Mike a lot, and there's a lot that I think he did awesome, but his job's way freaking harder now.
Yeah, it does make it tougher. John Schneider's going to have a lot more pressure on him. Lisa Carlson in the chat saying the worst part of this, now I got to admit, Bloomy, Dave Bloomquist is probably right, and it's get rid of Schneider time. I think this buys Schneider more time because now you are building with a new coaching staff, and unless ownership is furious that he got rid of Geno Smith, which I don't think would necessarily be the case.
Right.
Then I think he's bought himself some time with ownership. And then you're looking at Jody Allen as the owner. You're looking at John Schneider as the GM. You're looking at this coaching staff until the team ultimately gets sold. And then it's a reevaluate everybody's position time at that point.
Yeah, we have zero idea of the timeline on the team sale thing. Like, it was supposed to happen at one point, and then I heard it was like 10 years in the will from Paul Allen. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's the idea, like, people always ask, well, is Jody going to own the team? Who fucking knows? Like, I thought she was supposed to get rid of it pretty quickly, and then they didn't. And then I heard it could be for a long time, and she doesn't seem super big on selling it, so who knows?
Scott, I don't know. Scott in chat saying that's why he did it, to buy him more time. I don't know if it's necessarily. It's just, if John at all times, I believe him when he says that he's trying to do the right thing for the team at every moment. And the reason why I believe that is because it reflects on him and his job and his position. And if he doesn't think that paying Geno at a certain level that makes the team competitive in a certain way, if It does make his job a lot more tough, though, not having a quarterback. And because
Yeah.
then for a guy who hasn't drafted a quarterback in the first 6 rounds since Russell Wilson, you're going out and trying to find a guy. Well, he's gone out and found guys in free agency, but you've got to find a guy in the draft now. And this year, like Adams pointed out, probably not the year that you're going to find a guy that's going to be able to take over the team right away and put you in a position to be competitive toward the playoffs. And free agency might not be that either. And especially when Sam Darnold is the best option, if that is the option that you are hoping.
Yeah, I'd seen somebody, not in our chat, but on another thing, suggest Kirk Cousins for a year. And it's like, yeah, put Kirk Cousins behind that line and see what happens.
That wouldn't be good either. No. Yeah, what are the Falcons
We're
gonna
likely
do with
last in the division this year.
I'm waiting to see. I think Drew Lock can get us by the Cardinals.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because, in the last live that we did, you were talking about, hey, division's right there. You still got to get through the Rams, but there's only a half game difference between us this last year. Like, we're right there, a few moves, and you're winning the division. And now we're the bottom of the division.
For now. It's the offseason. We've got a long ways to go. We've got the draft. We've got free agency. We've got the rest of the month of March. Let's see what they do.
Okay, but to quote you from the last show as well, there is nobody out there that makes you better at the quarterback position in 2025 that you can get over Geno Smith.
Yeah. The
so
Niners were
I don't know what
6-11.
you're waiting to see for.
Oh, because that's what we do. It's part of the offseason. You wait to see what's going to happen. Eaglet Snupper, yeah, the Niners were 6-11. They were awfully wounded throughout the season.
Yeah.
Whether or not they can come back from that, we'll see. But yeah. Hey, I'm not saying Locke is the future quarterback either. Again, this is a lot. I'll repeat myself about after we lost Russell Wilson. We had a lot of bad options at quarterback. Geno Smith ended up being the best of all the bad options, although, maybe the guy that I advocated for that ended up going down to Tampa, Baker Mayfield, would have been the better of those options, but Geno was fine too.
Baker is not better than Geno Smith. I'd love to see Geno behind that offensive line and Baker behind this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that you got more than competent play out of Geno Smith in one of the worst situations in football, especially last year with a disaster offensive coordinator, an absolute fucking disaster, and a disaster on the right side of your offensive line.
Well, you can thank Ryan Grubb for Geno Smith being gone now. Benson DeWalt saying, let's go get Joe Burrow. Benson, you're aiming low, buddy. Let's go get Patrick Mahomes. If there's anything that I have witnessed in this past season and seeing the Lakers going out and getting Luka Doncic, it just tells me that anybody's available for trade at any time. Let's go get Patrick Mahomes out.
Is Nico Harris a NFL GM?
No.
Okay, well, that's unfortunate because we need a dumbass like that to trade away a generational talent to us for pennies on the dollar. Like, that's what we need. That's what we're hoping for right now. And I know you keep coming back to, well, Russ got traded, and then we got Geno, and it was all fine.
I don't like the voice that you use for me, by the way. I'm a little bit
only
over
when
that.
you say something that is so annoying, I can barely talk about it because, like, catching that sort of lightning in a bottle is hard to do. That doesn't just happen.
I understand.
Yeah, it's so much harder to do than finding a couple guards who are competent. I wasn't even asking for great. Just competent. And to get better than Geno, you're asking for great.
I want great.
That's cool. So
great.
do I. Okay. So do what would it be? 27 other teams in the NFL every year. They want great.
Yep.
There's like 5 of them a generation.
What do you think that the Raiders' win total is this season with Geno Smith at quarterback?
9 wins. Because it's Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. It'll be 9 wins.
And I think with that,
There's only one thing left to say.
go Hawks.
Go Hawks.